Hello and welcome to this episode of Regen Ag Chat. We are continuing with the Be the Change project. So today we're talking to two people, which is we're upping our game of podcasting. Sorry, I should have said my name's Liz Jennifer.
And I'm Nick Ranison.
Quite enthusiastic about my intro. So yeah, we are talking today to Henry, Nick's friend Henry,
Mm.
and Tarja Wilson from Forest of Bowland National Landscape. Nick, briefly, Henry, how do you know him?
I met Henry on a holistic management course, and he's completely everything that I'm not. He likes a cuddle. I'm not really into cuddling. He's very organized, very good at spreadsheets, and very efficient. And he's a welcome introduction to uh
He's articulate, you're not. Yeah. Oh,
he's not very tall, but he's just a thoroughly nice chap and is very good at everything I'm not.
there's enough negative talk out there. We can't do our own negative talk.
No, and I really like him and I like his story, and he isn't this is quite was very on trend for carbon calling. He isn't worried about being vulnerable.
It doesn't come up actually. He was at Carbon Calling last year. We did a family constellation session and he came to that session and he was my sister Susan in the session. So that is always a very, for those people who are in that room, it was a very interesting experience.
And Alan was in that room too.
He was. Excellent segue. So we've just done the event with Alan, where it was really popular, wasn't it? We had 70 odd people there in the very hot autumn market hall, but a nice day had by all, I think.
It was the super hot Wednesday of the heat wave we've just had. Yeah, it was good. A really good turnout. Lots of farmers there, Pasture for Life people, Pete Leeson from the Woodland Trust, and the carbon calling catering lady did amazing food. And also going back to Henry again, he talked about how we needed to have two problems for Alan. Two problems Alan's got that we could solve during the day, and they'd be a thread going through the day. And that I think those boxes they weren't maybe ticked off completely, but they were heavily discussed throughout the day. One of them was whether lime would be beneficial on the land, and the other one was a question around his conception rates. So it was really it's just a very enjoyable, free flowing day. But the horseflies were, or clegs, some people call them clegs, don't they? They were vicious.
Yeah, it was. They were distracting of all of these people wishing for more biodiversity in the world while killing horseflies.
But did you notice when we were under that tree, there was those massive dragonflies? Did you notice
Yeah,
those?
I'm trying to will more dragonflies into my life because they are predators for flies. This is
Are
mine.
they?
So actually something on Instagram, obviously, and he does mosaic grazing. So he goes in and out of different areas on a long pasture with the ambition of leaving tall grass around the cows for the dragonflies to land on because they need that sort of habitat. But yeah, they're absolutely vicious as predators.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know. But yeah, it was really good. And now we've got plenty of other stuff that we can kind of run with, things
And
that were discussed on the day.
and we like being in the awkward places, don't we? So I think the lime thing, because in a conventional ag situation, it would just be a given, like just whack it on, crack on. But actually, there was a couple of sort of it was quite an interesting discussion in terms of what impact would it have on the microbes. We've also got an analysis that shows that that soil should be around about 6.2 and is currently sitting about 5.8. So that's suggesting that something that is being done to that soil is affecting its pH. So it could be patience. We just need to time. But I think they're thinking of some small levels of intervention to see whether they'll see an impact. So that's what they've sort of heading
Yeah.
toward.
And I think because Alan's only got 3 years left on his agreement there, that's the kind of brought up the question for him. So and it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's lots of people who are renting land or grazing land, and it's who invests, how they split it, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was good.
Um, and yeah, I think that the fertility rate or conception rate, do you mean there was a few things that was came up? So one that he he probably or the suggestion from the group was he's tried to shorten his calving period too quickly, which could have been some of it. Definitely needs to do a fertility check on bulls. And then there's a grumbling, isn't there? A bit more of a grumbling of some trace element issues. So again,
Mm.
prevention is going in before the bull goes out this summer, and then look again, really. As we said in the ground rules, another suggestion
Yeah.
from Harry was the idea of respectful challenging, wasn't it? It wasn't about Alan or whoever going, "This is not working." It was about how do we frame it in a way that is a question.
And our last ground rule was basically don't be a twat. And luckily No one was.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it's hints of how Henry runs days very professionally, doesn't he? With a list of ground rules, and we do it and just say, "Just throw me a twat." It's fine.
Twat-free day.
Apart from ourselves, obviously. Negative talk again. And we also had Sarah's the week before. So Sarah's the farm down in Rutland. So that one, I think what was interesting about that entire day is that we did at the end, we asked what did people take out of it, and by fortuitousness, there was a weed surfer there on the day, which was taking out brome out of a field of barley, and that was the best bit of the day, and that wasn't anything to do with what we'd organised or all the work we'd done. It was just happened to be there on the day. And what came from that was that as a, albeit it would have been in the organic sector, as an option has only really emerged in the last 5 years for conventional farmers. And so we've had to produce something to solve a problem that we have created.
And interestingly, one of the girls who was there put a little video of that you might be able to tag on to this, episode, and she got so many, um, comments about that what that machine was doing on Instagram. So we can add that to it, but it was and you can see it working there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as Sarah would say, which is they've only really been farming that land for 3 seasons now, and they've significantly shifted its cultivation. So I think it's having a reaction. So we're seeing the reaction to that. I think what was terrifying when the one person walked into the path of it so they could get a better video, that was the terrifying moment, which I don't think this was on my risk assessment.
What was interesting was they put all the, what's it called, brome
Yeah.
in a pile, and then what was gonna happen to that? It was just gonna rot away.
No, because it doesn't rot because it's quite waxy. Think they were thinking they'd have to try and dry it out and then burn it.
Flipping heck.
We were suggesting putting it through pigs, but I think it's not the most pleasurable thing to eat, and obviously the concern is that it's still viable when it then comes out the other end. But pigs would have a lovely time in it.
But what shocked me was I don't know how long it took me to drive there from Cumbria to, was it Lincolnshire? Or is that Rutland? Is it Rutland a county?
Yes! Oh my
Oh,
god,
must be quite a small one.
it is the smallest county.
It's like 4 hours in a car, 3.5, and the difference in your rainfall down there, Liz, dear me. Like, the verges were burnt off.
Yeah, and it came up in that day, didn't we? We had this interesting debate about do you get grass where you've got trees? And it's really telling at the moment, which is where the green bits in a field are under trees because of the shade component. And it could, I mean, yes, it could be that there's extra leaf litter and there's extra nutrient of those things, but there's a huge factor of shade. Because we were getting up to our hottest day last week was 37, 38.
How do you function? Do you get up mega early and then
This is my top tip. I'm sharing it a lot, which is ice pack in your sports bra.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's the point where at that point you're like thankful. Yeah, in reality, like we were doing some silage and some hay, and so yeah, you just like tractors aren't very happy. So you just avoid. I was doing some stuff till 12. I think it's the afternoons that are the killers. So you just try and do stuff early. We were moving some sheep. I had to inject some lambs and move them, and so we started at 6. Still by then it was, and trying to think of like, is the pen in shade sort of like you're just having to think all the time about where the shade is.
and I wonder, is it worse, like, your Lincolnshire, if you go all the way down to the very bottom, does it get quietly worse and worse and worse?
Into the southwest.
Yeah.
Reality is I don't know because I haven't spoken to anybody from down there, but the red weather warning was over them for the last 3 days, so I'm guessing even if they had grass, it's now very crispy. But in the infamous rain shadow, I always joke about people and their rain shadows, but we have had rain around us, and I work with someone who's about half an hour north of me, and they've had quite a lot of rain. So it's because we rely on these, like, sporadic showers coming across that sometimes you get a downpour and it keeps you going. We haven't had them. So it's massive. It's got me down massively,
Yeah.
and it's just basically the same as it was last year, and so I know how hideous it was, like, and so part of it is that, like, here we go again. And I think the frustration is that you can feed yourself out. Like, we've made hay on an away block, so we know we've got stuff to feed. We've got barley in store, so we can feed lambs. So we've got options, which others don't. But it's just, and I think the bit that gets you after a while is that everything is so much harder. It's not like you can just turn things into a field and let them get on with it. So they're an appropriate grazing system. It's just like a constant. They'll be in here for like a week. Where do they go next? Like, where's next? Where's next? There's no recovery.
So with your old AHDB hat on, have you got any ideas on what you can, do to help people sort it?
The thing, and we It's an infamous phrase, which hope is not a positive course of action. So I think like, and we're like you've asked before, which is can we release stock? We're probably, depending on where we can put stuff, we're a couple of weeks away from weaning. So all of a sudden you can, junior ewes can we'll be selling some ewes, and those ewes can be like put on some banks and exist, but not have a brilliant time. Calves are 4, 5 months old, so we can't. There's not a huge amount of options at the moment. We've got a group of heifers that we could potentially sell, but ironically, they're about to go into some. They're doing okay in terms of grass. They're on the side of a river. They're eating reeds, if nothing else. But what we're as a longer term plan, we're just gonna reduce stock. So this winter we'll have fewer animals.
And then you might grow lucerne.
Yeah, at the moment we're just struggling to get things established, so we'll try and get some undersown into some spring crops next year. And the other thing is you don't wanna have these massive knee-jerk reactions based on, but I think we're all now working on this is
Mm.
new, this is what's common now. So,
What year is
uh,
this? Is it
well, what was it? 2022 we got up to 40 degrees. 23, I think we were okay. 25 was hot. So yeah, we're out of the last 5 years, we've probably had 3 extreme years.
not good, is it, Lilibet? Bit of a
Mm.
trend.
Yeah, and we're trying to put more. We're going to definitely put more tree. We've got a lot of trees. We're going to put more trees into the middle of fields, and also putting in tree fodder. Like do a proper tree fodder program, so we can, albeit not now, in the next 5, 10 years, we can lob like that is one solution. So there'll be stock here, but it will be a reduced number. We just can't. It's just exhausting, just the stress of it.
But
And
what
I
was
haven't.
interesting at Alan's was there was a bit of kind of chat about trees in fields and stuff, and some of it was kind of the old way of thinking about it potentially about, their slightly negative angle, but I think there was a majority thought it was very positive, because I don't think we can really do without them.
Yeah, and I think and obviously the difficulty is well, not a difficulty, but whether wouldn't it be great if we have alleyways in our arable crops? I don't think we're quite there yet, but I don't think it's gonna be that long until we have to be. And that's a statement and a half, but for me, some of it is about how we then manage stock in those fields. Like I've got a field that's only 35 acres, but the only shade is around the side, and so you just daren't put you can't it's really difficult to graze that effectively with stock in the summer in with the current temperatures. So then you go, actually, what I should have done is not is it just allocated for silage this time of year? Like next year, I'm not going to have stock grazing in it in June, because it's
But it's
just
funny
it's,
how exhausting it is because we talked before we started recording about, I think I've forgotten his name, Doug? Doug
yeah.
Avery. And I listened to a talk he did up here at the Reg Ed Centre, and, this kind of weather zaps any positivity or, uh, joy in the day, doesn't it? When you're just fighting
I
to
think
do the basics.
but I think it's the same. Like I remember probably being equally as grumpy when it was just relentless rain. It's the fact is, it's the you and I'm not. For me, it's not about control for once. It's just about actually being able to make decisions or having options. And so, like we've put in reseeds that would have been an option, like high legume, all of that stuff that is what you like ticking a box for what you should be doing in these circumstances. It just didn't grow because it didn't rain. So that's the bit that's frustrating. And equally, like in the winter when it was relentless for us, relentless rain on flatlands, clay is doing it does feel miserable. It's like it doesn't you don't have the options are reduced. That's the bit that's frustrating. So anyway, it does feel like it will beat me, but it will not beat me.
Well, you just adapt.
And it will rain. We're a maritime climate. It will rain. Like the Doug Avery, like when you listen to that, and that was 8 years. I'm not
Mm.
saying I deserve less because I haven't suffered enough. But and we're fortunate that we can learn from like dry land production from New Zealand or France, or do you mean we've got loads of places we can go and look and it reminds you that you just soil needs to be covered. Do you mean it just we have to completely think differently of what we've done before because we've always just got away with it.
Mm.
And we can't.
Oh, well,
Anyway,
mm,
positive, but some days not so much. Never ever want to go on holiday to anywhere hot ever again.
you
What?
will, you will.
No, no.
That's quite a cost saving for you then.
It is. And you get into then you get into the moral dilemma of do you get aircon? I'm like, no.
I know. Well, we have just this will slightly annoy you. We have just dug a pond that is also pond/swimming pool, and, oh, it's been a lifesaver. I think Reno might be in it now, actually.
Well,
So we've
I
been having a morning dip. If anyone came here and saw us, like, both walking down there with not much on, hardly anything on, having a swim, and then coming back with Nigel.
not that close to your house, is it? It is a good 5-minute walk.
Oh, but no, it's just and there's so much wildlife there. There's so much, like, just loads of good stuff. It's made me wanna dig more ponds. This was
Well
an old one that we kind of rejuvenated, but it's amazing.
Well, thank you. We've got ponds, they've got no water in them. And the irony is that when they're just about to start the pipeline work to take water that falls on our land that goes along to go back into Stamford, because we sit on an aquifer. So there is an idea that we might want a borehole, or at least be able to tap off some water.
Boreholes are good, aren't they? But Jimmy Stobbart's just done a borehole and he thinks it's marvellous.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're gonna really want it really close to their new pipe, but yeah, there's some deals to be done, I think. Can you imagine how quick a water tank would fill connected to a water line? And so, yeah, the east-west pipeline's coming in, they're doing some test pits for that, so that's going across 3 fields this year, and then they're just doing some test pits for the north-south pipeline that goes through another 4 different fields. So, yeah, we'll be intersected by pipelines carrying lots of water that have no water. I've already spoken to Marion because she's very concerned because of the energy flows. It'll disrupt the energy flows. Got a massive pylon, loads of electricity moving south, and then we'll have water moving south and then water moving west. We need to think about how we deal with our energy flows.
Your little jobby sticks will be going, "Oh, I don't know what to do."
Indeed. Dowsing rods. It's the word. Anyway, what I didn't also speak of is that you forgot about Tarja. So Tarja and I, it's just
Yeah.
me and Tarja. So it is. I realised that you bring lightness to my interviewing techniques. It's quite serious about birds. So for that, I don't apologise because we love birds. But yes, so it isn't me. It isn't the dream team with me with Tarja. Tarja's been involved in carbon calling for years, so it's nice that we're now working with one of the farms that she works with as well. So that's important. And so the 9th is the Liz and Rob event. There'll be details in the show notes. And there's an opportunity just to hear about ticks, a bit about fungi, a bit about birds and waders, and meet the legend that is Rob.
Henry will be talking about MSO,
Indeed.
maximum sustainable output, and he'll make it easy to digest.
And the questions that have emerged from MSO or the report that was done was, do they need to adjust the stocking? Is it a case of fewer sheep, more cattle? The suggestion from it is just more stock in general, but again, working out what that might look like and how we do this alongside reducing feed and fert inputs. So it's like a perfect problem we need to think about. And then obviously under the light that is ticks, which is pardon the pun, drains quite a lot of blood out of the enterprise.
So the day starts at 10:30
Yeah, for 11 o'clock.
for 11 o'clock at Sladeburn Village Hall. People just pay for lunch, I think. Is it 20 quid?
Yeah, it
Right?
is 20 quid, but it's subsidised, so that's basically covering lunch, it's not covering all the speakers. Got to say, James Bretherton will be there talking about soil. Forgot to mention him, sorry.
So it's going to be a great day. Liz and Rob are great value. Rob is potentially a stand-up comedian in disguise, I
We
think.
might have to have some sort of bleep button.
He'll be good. He'll be good. I think he could be the Clarkson's farm. Is it the gamekeeper chap?
Or is he the Waller? Gerald?
Gerald. Yeah, I think he could possibly step into that role because he's just got that quick wittedness. I love it. Anyway, yeah. So enjoy the chat with Henry and Tarja. Henry, we met Farm Ed for the holistic management course, didn't we?
We did. Yes.
And you were that was a couple of years ago, and you were going through some quite major changes in your work life.
Mhm.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your background and yeah, bring us up to date a little bit too?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the podcast as well. And yeah, when we met at Farm Ed, when I was doing the holistic management training, that was kind of 6 months into me trying to work out where I was going to get involved in regenerative farming, because I'd been involved in farming my whole life, because on my mum's side of the family, they're dairy farmers from Lancashire, so where I'm from. And my mum's business, which is EnviroSystems, supplied products into the dairy sector, so EnviroBed, recycled paper waste products. And I was working at the family business at that time. And I came across regenerative farming and I was just so excited by it because it was bringing in that kind of holistic systems thinking approach to farming. And it just made a lot of sense to me. So then I got on to 3LM and holistic management in the Savory Institute. And I just really wanted to get involved. So at that time when we met, and it was great because we weren't that far away from each other, were we? Obviously, you were looking to apply it in a more practical way, whereas I was thinking, how can I bring this and my experiences before to help with the regenerative movement?
Well, I think it was a good combination because I'm obviously very hands-on, practical, you know, grazing, moving cows and stuff, and you were very much into spreadsheets and data and
Yeah,
making sums add up, which is exactly what the regen movement kind of is lacking. So there's quite
yeah.
often a lot of practical passion, but you bring the, slightly boffiny type mode to it.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
There's a
But
compliment hidden
Yeah,
somewhere in there, I'm
exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
no,
A-
it was a good combination.
And it was actually at your farm when I visited it that I first came across maximum sustainable output because you mentioned it to me that it'd been around for a little while and it was something that you'd done a bit of training with. So at the time, it wasn't something that I went straight into because that was 2023, but it always kind of stayed in the back of my mind and then came forward 2 years later.
Circles. It's all about circles,
Uh,
connections.
exactly.
Um, and then, Henry, what are you busy doing at the minute? So, we're obviously working. We'll talk about the event in a second, but what else are you up to?
Yeah, so I set up Russell Regen, which is my consultancy in 2023. So it's in November 2023. And back then, I just thought I want to work directly with farmers, which is still something that I'm doing now. But I actually realized that there's a lot of work to do in local food system movement, in common land projects, sustainable land use. So I've ended up getting involved in lots of really interesting projects involving common land. So I act as a common land facilitator. So working with various farming groups who are looking to get into agri-environment schemes or who are in farming schemes. And that's kind of bringing in my skill set and experience as a facilitator. But I'm also involved in lots of projects like the Farming in Protected Landscapes project that we're going to get into, so the FIPL project, around project coordination, project management, basically getting things done and trying to coordinate diverse groups of people.
We were really fortunate that we sneaked in an MSO on Liz and Rob's through the project that you'd already started. So
Yep.
again, we appreciate that. So I don't know, do you wanna just talk us through the project and then we'll go
Yeah,
into
absolutely. Yeah, so um, this has kind of been in the pipeline for a little while, this project, because we were inspired by a report that was brought out by the Food Farming and Countryside Commission in 2021, which was called Farming for Change. And what this report essentially said was that agroecology, so regenerative farming, could feed the UK, which has been a bit of a challenge over the years because, you know, one of the pushbacks from conventional farming to regenerative is, well, it's all well and good, but it can't feed the country. And what this report showed was that actually it can. But this was a national level. We're looking to bring this to a more local level, so specifically North Lancashire. Um, so initially, we engaged with Forest of Bowland National Landscape and Arnside and Silverdale National Landscape around looking at if we could adapt that model to a local level. So we're kind of still asking the same question, but maybe bringing it to a more specific area so that, you know, local food system movements and local farmers could actually use this data and take that forward. And when we first went to the National Landscapes teams, they said, oh, that sounds really good. But what would be great would be to have a maximum sustainable output element to it as well. So one which is more kind of practical farmer engagement, working with a couple of farmers in both the national landscapes to take them through the process and then hold a couple of events at the end to kind of work through the results and see what other farmers could do with that.
I'm just trying to think of, have we introduced what MSO is enough? Probably not. So we
No,
may take a couple of steps back and just talk through it.
sure thing. Yeah, so one thing to say is that I am not an MSO advisor. So if anyone wants really in-depth MSO work, then they should go to Nethergill Associates and Chris Clark and Brian Scanlon. Um, and the background to it is that Chris was running a livestock farm in Yorkshire, and he had a background in business, and he had a friend, Brian Scanlon, um, who worked in the energy sector. And what they found was that normally when your output increases, so the more volume you do, the more your costs go up, so your variable costs. But what they found in agriculture, so livestock farming in particular, is that at a certain point, your variable costs start to shoot up. And they found that that's the point that you start using synthetic, so man made inputs. So things like synthetic fertilizer, pesticides, fungicides, seed, and feed. And at first, this kind of blew their mind because they thought, well, how is this possible? This kind of breaks all the rules. But then when they worked it back, they realized that in those man made inputs, there's a lot of embodied energy, and that energy costs money. So then, if you move to using those inputs, you're actually going to make less money in the end because you're not preferring your free issue sunshine, rainfall, soil, which are there on the farm. And this is one of the really exciting things about regenerative farming is that if you can build your soil and you can use more of what you've got and be in balance with your livestock numbers with your land, then actually you'll be more profitable. And that is the basic principle of MSO. They go into a lot more kind of um, analyses and sophisticated points, but at the crux of it, that is what MSO is all about.
It's referred to as a sweet spot quite often, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And do you know what, Henry? That was a great explanation. Thank you.
thank you.
Really clear.
I've had a little bit of practice now through the Fipple project.
So just then jumping back to the FIFA project, so then you had funding to do 2 farms, didn't you, through the MSO route?
Yes.
And then Liz and Rob were one of those farms.
Yep.
And then and we'll t and there's an opportunity at the event also to hear about the results, but just give us the couple of the headline figures of what was found at Liz and Rob's farm.
Yeah, so what Forest of Bowland National Landscape really wanted was a representative upland setting, challenging landscape farm. So that when we had these events, the farmers who came to them could go, ah, yeah, okay. Because I think that one of the challenges that's sometimes faced is that if you get a less challenging farm, then people could turn up and go, oh, well, that's okay because you're lowland setting or you've got good soil. Or whereas there wasn't really that with Liz and Rob's because it is a challenging environment that they're in. They've got 2,200 acre upland setting, a lot of moorland, and a very small amount of in-by. So, and they were absolutely brilliant to work with on the project because, um, so my role wasn't actually doing the MSO. I went to see them because I don't live very far away. I'm only half an hour up the road from them. Taught them through what the process will be, and then was just there to talk to them about what their experience was as they went through it. And then at the event that we ran at Sladeburn, so it's the same village hall that we're going to have the event on the 9th of July, we had about 50 attendees. And part of the day was me interviewing Liz and Rob about what their experience was of MSO. And the main points that came out of their analysis, um, which Chris was cursing us for a little bit, so Chris Clark, because they were actually below their sweet spots. They were below their MSO, whereas a lot of farms that they do, probably about 90%, are overstocked. So they're beyond their MSO point, and their recommended action is probably to destock over time and bring the livestock numbers in line with the land in more balance. Whereas with Liz and Rob's, they were still using synthetic inputs, so they've still got that kind of energy dependency, not a huge amount, but they're still there. But their MSO point was actually beyond the line. So it was more difficult, and we're going to have to kind of navigate this on the day to explain to people what this chart means, because the conclusion that they came to was, well, actually, you should be increasing your livestock, cutting down your synthetic inputs if you can, and bringing more cattle numbers in and reducing your sheep numbers. Um, so that was a really interesting. We can talk a little bit more about that because I know that this is something that you've covered with them on their podcast. So I'll just pause there.
This is where, I suppose MSO always starts to hit buffers, is they declare this to be, this is what needs to happen, and then it's the steps we then need to do. And so part of what we're hoping to talk through at the event on the 9th is that actually what are some steps that we could do to get
Yep,
towards that point, and
yep,
recognizing the limitations of the housing or of
yep,
what the is currently doing. I think it raises questions, doesn't it? And not
yeah,
necessarily doesn't provide the answers
yeah.
immediate.
Yeah, and I think for me, something that's really great about MSO is this idea of splitting out your subsidies. So they have it as contributions, so first, second, and third contributions. But for me, it's putting your environmental subsidies, grants to one side and saying, okay, if we didn't have those, would we be profitable still? And the answer might be yes, it might be no. And when you bring them back in, we do make money. But that exercise of actually saying, well, let's look at our enterprises that we've got here. So at Lamb Hill, it's beef and sheep. And then looking at, right, okay, what are the inputs that are going into those? What revenue are we making? Are we paying ourselves a salary to do that work? Are we getting in contractors? And then just having more discipline about where do we stand right now? And this was something that is in holistic management, isn't it, Nick?
Mm.
Like this was what we were taught at Farm Ed. And that approach, so I use that when I'm working with farmers because I do this regenerative finance assessment, which is really looking at where are the gaps, where's the confusion in the numbers, because most businesses have confusion in the numbers, and bringing clarity to that can really help decision making. So I think that exercise is even more pronounced with Lamb Hill because they have so much. Uh, I wouldn't say a reliance. It's been that they've been committed to environmental schemes over time, and that's been a really important point because they've got a lot of peatland, they've got a lot of moorland, which is, and they're landowner, so they're a tenanted farm off United Utilities. So there's a lot of kind of competing demands on that land from an environmental and a farming perspective. So bringing more clarity to that, I think, was really valuable to Liz and Rob, and hopefully will continue to in their reporting.
A bit, and I suppose the bit that we want to explore is that we don't know what might happen to environment scheme payments. We probably recognise that that particular bit of the world will have some support mechanism in, but we don't know for certain. So it is trying to, it's not like willing it into existence, is it? But going, actually, what could be if those payments reduced?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a risk assessment. basically. It's not a term that's often used in farming, but we're sort of going, well, what would happen if we got in a new government and they said, well, we're pulling all funding for environmental schemes? Like, where would that leave our business? How resilient are we to future political changes or global changes?
But I think farmer psychology also is they they'll love to well, we've done it ourselves. You sell livestock and you're very proud of that money you bring in. You receive a brown envelope and it's kind of it's y you're not quite so I don't know, there's no real link with it, if you get what I mean. You're given it and you think
Mm.
it's a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it because there's been so much investment that you've put into that livestock that you're then getting a payment for at the end.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
But
and I think that sorry, another thing that I wanted to mention was this point around cash and stock as well, because especially with cattle farming, it's such a long-term investment that then appreciates in 2 or 3 years' time. That's another kind of discipline that is sometimes missed in farming is sort of seeing the difference between cash today and what stock we hold. But anyway, I could talk about finance stuff all day.
But I think as Nick said, which is it's an area that, um, we a lot of people just continue and hope, don't they? I mean, the infamous hope is not a positive course of action, but is there that something will come and save us. So whether it is the current higher livestock prices, do you mean that a lot of people are benefiting from? But that's not value that's been actually accumulated within the business, isn't it? It's just what the market's doing, and that value can easily also reduce.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah,
I suppose
exactly.
the challenge always is that in when we've got good prices is the need to change
Mm,
is diminished.
yeah,
thinking environmentally of Lamb Hill,
mm,
like they're environmentally, they, for their United Utilities, their landlord, how they farm there, it has a huge financial impact on United Utilities. So I think it's also recognizing the good that good land management from Liz and Rob can do. As in,
yeah,
there's a huge value to that.
yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was gonna mention, because this was kind of brought up earlier and then we didn't go into it. Um, yeah, so one of the really important things that came out of the Fipple project was as well as these in-person farm events, we also did an online farm advisor workshop, which was run by myself and basically went through the concepts of maximum sustainable output, went through the results for the two farms that we went through. So this had farm advisors who were in Forester Bowl and Arnside and Silverdale and other areas of the country to kind of bring on their understanding of MSO. And one of the main findings from that, or pieces of feedback, was that MSO is a tool in the toolkit. So it's a really valuable analytical approach, which then, if paired with on the ground local understanding, whether that's the farmer themselves or farm advisors from, the Rivers Trust or RSPB or Pasture for Life, organisations like that, or the national landscapes themselves, that is when the really impactful change could happen. Because, like you mentioned, Liz, it's about a step by step approach. It's not going from where we are now to MSO. It's saying, okay, this is what the report said. This is what we found out. What's now the how to get to that point or get to closer to that point so that we've got better profitability on the farm?
And Henry, just on you're involved with Roots to Regeneration, aren't you? So that's
I am.
this must be is it their second cohort going through?
Third cohort.
Wow.
Yep, they're just recruiting for the fourth cohort at the moment, and I've actually just got off a call with Caroline and Claire, and they've they've nearly half subscribed the next year's cohort. already, and we're in June, and that's to start next March. So the kind of momentum behind it is really growing.
For
And not
people who
Yeah,
people aren't as familiar, I'll put a link in the show notes, but what in
yeah,
terms of it's a year-long program. We remember some of them that must have been from the first year, came to one of the carbon calling conferences.
yeah.
Just talk us through that.
Yeah, so it's actually a 2-year program, but the first year is more intensive teaching. So that's where you get the most block of it. And it was basically Caroline Grindrod and Claire Hill developed this program because they found that actually a lot of people who are in regenerative farming want to know the answer. They want the grazing plan produced for them. They want the technology that's going to help. But actually, their view is, and a view that I share, is that we need to develop ways of seeing things and ways of thinking regeneratively before we can actually get to the point of developing a grazing plan. So there's a lot of different kind of influences and lineages that contribute to the program, but it starts with developing your own context. So looking at whether you're a professional or a farmer, so this is for farmers and professionals, um, you're looking at developing basically your vision, like what's important for you, and then moving to looking at things in terms of systems. So whether that's the system of your business within the wider system, or it's your farm within the wider farm ecosystem and nature in general. Um, and then you move to the more practical steps of developing your grazing plan. And there's so much in it. It's so exciting to be involved in it for me because Caroline and Claire just bring so much experience, knowledge, and wisdom into the design of the program. And my role in it is around the kind of assisting with both the delivery of it here and there, but also improving the design of it. So I've gone through the whole program myself and sort of given feedback about areas that were great and areas which could be improved, and then they're just building it year on year. And it's it's a brilliant program. I'm really excited to be involved with it.
So, and I suppose it's interesting that the mixture of people, so it is farmers, isn't it? And it's others that are working within supply chains or interested, or maybe landowners, or
Yeah,
they want to become more involved. So it's that's power is always within the group, isn't it? Of the
yeah.
contacts you make within that.
And the conversations are incredible just by having that diversity of backgrounds. Most people are involved in the food system in one shape or another, but you get all sorts of people coming along to it, and it's a brilliant blend. Really good way of kind of stretching thinking and getting out of just being in our own groups, which are
Mm.
more comfortable to be in.
Yeah, well, I think, Henry, you've done an amazing thing because you could have do you look back and think, um do you look back and realize that the jump you've taken from having a very comfortable corporate quite corporate, I'm thinking, family business to kind of stepping back and saying, "I wanna change." Like,
Mm.
you've you've created a lot of chaos probably for yourself.
Yeah, not for the first time. I think that there are probably 2 or 3 times. So I'm 38 now, and there's probably 2 or 3 times in my career where my family have slapped their hand on their forehead and gone, "What on earth is Henry doing now?" Because, the first thing I did was I did a PhD in biochemistry and then got to the end of that and decided I never wanted to be in a lab ever again. So I was then like, right, what am I going to do? So I went and worked for an environmental charity in Edinburgh and I think I was paid minimum wage. And my family were like, you've literally spent 7 years at university and you've come out to go and get a minimum wage job. And and I just thought, well, that's what I want to do. Like that's what excites me. And then at the end of that work at the charity, I came back to the family business. Um, and I think that my boss said some pretty choice words to me at the time, like, "What the have you asked yourself what the F you're doing?" And I was like, yes, I have actually." I did sort of think about that. And then this time again. So, I'm still connected with the family business. Family business is still doing really, really well. And yeah, it's I don't know, I just tend to try and follow my heart as much as I can. And my wife's amazing as well because she trusts in what I do. So every time that I do something relatively left field, she always says, "Well, you'll work it out. It'll do well." So
I think having worked in a family business and dealing with lots of farmers who are very often family businesses, you'll have a huge understanding of the complications and, you know, differences of a family business.
it's helped me in more ways than I ever could have known because I thought I was going into something pretty different from what I was doing because my last job was, ultimately responsible for about 15 people in the business. So I was operations director there. So I was overseeing all the different functions in the business. So sales, marketing, finance, research, and production. So I was kind of overseeing this, and and I kind of thought, well, I'm going to a more of a consultancy role. So um, I thought they'd be quite different, but actually, like you say, I've been in a family business. Most farms and actually most businesses in the UK, I think it's something like 65% of businesses are family businesses. So because I've been through that, I understand the challenges and stresses that are put on the family
Mm.
from running a family business. It becomes your life. And yeah, and also just the understanding of running a business as well. Because, you know, farmers that I talk to or any businesses that I talk to, we all face the same pressures. And to have been through that in my family business, because when I came back, we went through a really, really hard time. That was one of the main prompts that brought me back to the business. Yeah, one of our main suppliers went into direct competition with us, took a member of our staff, and it was really looking very challenging for us. So at that point, I was like, yep, that's the time to come back when things are really, really hard. Um, but it was one of the best decisions I've made because it was such a steep learning curve. And again, those experiences, like when we change tack in our careers, we take those with us, and they sort of show up in ways that we don't expect later down the line.
Yeah, no, it's good.
And it comes back to people, doesn't it? And always come across as someone who really wants to connect and understand.
Mm,
And so when you're there, it doesn't not that it doesn't matter where you work, but that's the core skill,
yeah.
and then you just apply it to wherever you find yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And when I set up on my own, within about three 3 or 4 months, yeah, I am going to tell this story. Um, so I was looking for case study farms to work with, and I ended up working with a couple who were down south. So they'd bought a plot of land and they were looking to know what to do with it. And I was sort of trying to take them through the holistic management framework, and the amount of kind of marital tiffs they were having with each other. Um, I just was there like, I don't know what to do here. Like, am I meant to? Because they were just meh, 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 like having a go at each other. And I thought, are they wanting me to step in here? Are they wanting this to fizzle out? Like, I just froze and was like, I'll just let it play its course, and then went, so, and then moved on to the next thing. But at the end, they said, one of their feedback was, I really wish you'd stopped us bickering with each other. And at that point, I thought, well, this is going to show up again and again and again. So I went and got facilitation training. So in group facilitation work, because I thought, well, actually, a lot of the time we've got the answers that we need. and it's actually either our individual or collective blockers that are stopping us from moving forward. So things like conflict management, creating group spaces where people can have open conversations with each other became something that I saw as really important. So I then went off and again this was another thing which my family slapped their head with, I think, because I went and got facilitation training in Canada. And I think my brother-in-law actually, who's a Scouser, he was like, "You're a blagger, you. Like, why can't you go and get a course in, in Lancashire? Why have you got to go to Nova Scotia in Canada to get trained?" Um, but it was just a course that the practitioners were so skilled and artful in what they did that I was like, I'm sold. So I went and did that training. This was after holistic management. So this was end of 2024, beginning of 2025. And that training has been absolutely pivotal to what I do because I'm always working with people, always working with groups or in one-to-one settings and kind of helping people to understand what they want to achieve, either as a group or as an individual, is has to be the starting point with anything and like moving beyond cloudy thinking.
Cloudy thinking, that is a good saying.
I've never said
I
that
kind of
before.
That could be on a
I
T-shirt, Liz.
was thinking that question, which is if you were weather, what would you be? Cloudy. Um,
Do
I
you know
think,
what Liz would be, Henry? Do you know what Liz would be?
stormy.
Stormy,
Thunderstorm. A thunderstorm.
thunderstorm.
Importantly, it's the wildness before the storm hits. That's my favourite bit. Anyway, this is a side point. But I think what's
She
interesting,
has
so
she
you're
has got the wind tunnel going on our
not
video.
only not
She's got the
a fan on.
yeah.
I'm in the extreme heat. It's not like in the north. Anyway, but some of that, and that'll be interesting in terms of how we approach the event at Liz and Rob's, because you're helping curate that event in a bit more of with. We've worked out Nick and I just turn up and use our intuition, and you may provide a bit of robustness to this, perhaps. Um,
Well, I said this to you the other day. I've attended a number of your events and they are all wonderful. Like I love how natural you both are and real in the way that you lead your events. And also, I've said before, Nick, you're one of the funniest people I've ever met. You just have me.
I think
I think you'd have a
I
lot
thi
of people disagreeing with you on that.
no, I think I'm a combination of Fleabag and Miranda, which is not good. Foot in mouth syndrome.
what we should have done here is accept the compliment with grace, not
I
dispute
know.
it. Try again.
Yeah.
I don't think I can. Like a syndrome I have.
Yeah.
Say thank you.
Thank
Move
you.
on.
Thank you, Henry.
You're welcome.
See, growth is possible.
Exactly.
Thank you, Henry, and we will see you on the 9th. So that would be
Great
and
stuff.
for the Liz and Rob show.
Yes. I'm excited for it.
Hello, Tarja. Thank you for joining us on this special podcast, really focusing on sort of the people who have worked with Liz and Rob. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about your work with them on the Wader survey. So you've been doing it with them for quite a few years, haven't you? So can you just talk through what you do for that survey?
So waders, so in terms of the survey, it's the breeding period for the waders that use farmland in Bowland and other areas of the uplands like North Pennines, Yorkshire Dales, etc. And the main birds that are the curlew, the lapwing, snipe and the oyster catcher. And if we're lucky, we'll get redshank on some cat farms. And you obviously get things like sandpipers and things like that, but it's focusing on the lapwing, curlew, oyster catcher and snipe are the main ones. And this farm has some good areas of habitat in terms of fields that are adjacent to each other. So you end up with a kind of landscape that suits these birds to use it during the breeding period. So quite big numbers of, for example, curlew and lapwing will go back to the coast outside the breeding season, and then they come back inland into the Pennines and into Lowland and the Dales to breed.
And that I know this sounds like a really naive question, but they've evolved alongside this managed farmland, or what would is that it already have been grazed, or what do you think? What's the history of that interaction between the birds and that farmland?
Um, well, some of them breed really well on the moorlands, on the the more expansive moorland habitats. So curlew do well on there, and in some edges of the moorland where it's um, a shorter sward, you'll get lapwing there, which is similar to like ring plover. Golden plover, that like areas like that. Whereas the farmed land, i.e., below the moorland line, what we know as in-by land or the more managed land, such as the meadows and pastures closer to the farmstead, the birds have certainly evolved to adapt to the way that land is farmed. By the essentially it's mostly upland farming areas, though there are areas of dairy units lower down that the birds will use their land as well. But it's the upland sheep and beef.
And they particularly like relatively short grass, so visibility is good. Or what's the preference? Or they like that
It
managed or
varies
grazed?
actually according to the species. So if you can visualize a lapwing, it's essentially black and white. So it isn't as well camouflaged, such as a curlew and a snipe, which is more brown and mottled, can adapt to your kind of browner, lighter coloured grasses. So those birds will cope with longer grass swards, with a curlew and a snipe, and they're suited to that mixed sward that you get on the moorland as well. Whereas the lapwing does like the short sward because it's relying on being able to see what's happening on the ground as well as in the air. Whereas the curlew and the snipe haven't got such a concern about activity of predators or farm activity on the ground.
And, no, it's just interesting because we're meant to have lapwing, and we occasionally see them fly past, and they never stop. So I don't know much about the birds at all. It's interesting that they, as you say, those preferences and that they've sort of moved into areas where that farming's been different or has changed.
And it
And
does
then
vary across the UK. They have adapted to different type of habitats and farming practices in different parts of the UK. So they
so
will use arable areas, but we don't have arable up here. So
um, my sister has reliably told me that on Jeremy Clarkson's farm last night, although she was watching it, and they were talking a lot about these were skylarks, but same ground nesting birds, and they had cut their hay a couple of weeks too early, and so destroyed quite a lot. So is there something about this hay silage debate, and is that um, has that been part of the problem, or is it now? I suppose now people are being paid to take later cuts of hay.
um, over time, farming practices have changed. So so your hay silage, for example, in the past, most of it was hay meadows, and it was hay cut a lot slower over several weeks because it was either cut by hand or even by the early kind of mowing practices. They wouldn't have cleared a field in one day or less than a day like they do now. And thus the birds could move, as the hay was being cut. So if you cut hay, you cut it and it drops, it's left to dry, and then the farmer will come along and then they'll ted it or draw it out, to turn it over for drying. And in the past, there was more time for the birds to adapt to that and move in and out of that. Corncrake's another good example of a bird in areas that very much did well in traditional hay meadows. Hay now is cut quicker than it used to be, but silage is the most challenging for these birds, partly because it's cut a lot earlier usually, and some people will take 2 or 3 cuts of silage, whereas if you're taking a hay cut, it's 1 cut, and quite often it's a lot later by the time the birds have had chance for the chicks to move on or move out to those areas into different feeding territories or adapt to the mowing equipment going on, being there.
And I'd never thought about it being later, but I hadn't really, as you say, that it's slower, isn't it? Like the idea of the speed of that practice has changed, so they don't get the chance to move out of the way as they
Yes.
did. That's interesting. Sorry.
Potentially another concern for silage fields is that some contractors, because farmers use contractors quite often because of the tight window with weather and getting cut in, they'll work at night as well, whereas in the past they would never have done vehicle movements on a field at night.
Okay. So that sort of need for the progress speed, getting jobs done hasn't helped at all.
Mm.
Okay, and then from a Lamb Hill perspective, so there, what would well, just talk us through how you do the surveys on them for
So
them.
I used I do the surveys for the RSPB. I've done surveys with BTO as well, and it's a similar methodology where you undertake during the breeding season 3 separate visits, and you do the visit early morning within the first couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours at the most of sunrise. So the middle of April, I'll do my first visit, and there's a window roughly about 2 and a bit weeks to do that first visit, and then you'll repeat that visit 2 or 3 weeks later, and then you'll repeat it the third visit. So by the time you get to that second, third week in June, you've done 3 separate visits, and I'll walk the farm. Well, actually, I'm lucky with this farm. It depends on the location, the nature of the road that leads down to it. I can actually stop and do about 10 or 15 minutes without even getting onto any of the fields, observing the majority of the fields. And then I'll note what I can see. I'll look to see if I can spot any birds, what the behaviour is like, and then see if there's any crows or buzzards or gulls in the area. And then I'll park up and I'll walk the farm. What you're trying to do is record the number of birds, what type they are, but their behaviour before you disturb them. That's not always ideal, i.e., lapwings are very easy to disturb, whereas something like a snipe can virtually stand on a snipe nest. I've never done it, fortunately, but I can be that close to a snipe nest, it lifts just before I'm there, and it makes you jump, but they'll hold tight quite often. Whereas a lapwing, as soon as one bird's alarmed, the other birds in the area, they're quite got a very good group activity of trying to fend me off and warn their chicks or the other birds, there's somebody in the area. So I'll walk the farm. I note the point where I first see each bird, and then there's some standard kind of symbols that you can use for if the bird's just there, or if a bird's actually just making a call, and it might be earlier in the season where it's doing a curlews are quite distinctive in terms of lapwings in terms of their courtship behaviour, whereas later on you'll get a different type of behaviour and sound. If an alarm call, and likewise, something like a snipe has two distinctive calls. One's like a chip, 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 chip sound if it's not so sure and it's not keen on you coming, or if once they're up and flying, their feathers on the snipe actually vibrate and you get this kind of drumming sound, which is the most amazing sound that you get. You can't see the bird, or very rarely see it, but you can hear it.
Yeah, because actually Rob was on the podcast we did was mentioned this drumming sound when they're migrating down, is you can hear the sound of the drumming. That's what you just remembered. Anyway, so I then
Yeah.
didn't realise it was the feathers that made the sound. I thought it was
Yeah, so it's like the tail feathers and that. And you get that lovely sound, especially early evening, you can hear the snipe drumming. Sometimes you'll be lucky and they'll be quite low when they're drumming. And I've been on longer, quiet country lane and it's literally just there following the road, drumming along. And woodcock sometimes do that as well.
it's like a bird watching with. So in terms in that, so how many years have you done it for them or with them or at their place?
Um, Consistently for the last 5 years, but before then I did it on an ad hoc basis. But I've been surveying breeding waders using this methodology for over 20 years now, on different farms in Bowling. And then I'd had a spell of doing some in the Yorkshire Dales as well.
And you're sort of obviously motivated because you love a breeding wader, but also just for helping them generate the evidence of how they're managing and fitting in with schemes. And so how do you use the information with them?
It's great because, so for example, I might be out and I might be part of the way around the survey or at the end of it, and then Rob will be out checking his sheet. And so I can collect that extra information about what he's observed when I've not been there. And so I note that down. But then we'll have a chat about, when did he actually apply the farmyard manure on some of the fields, what he's noticed in the last couple of weeks, because the farmers themselves quite often know where the nests are or have spotted the chicks. So I might notice the behavior of the adults, but I don't actually haven't definitely seen the chicks. Or actually, I don't purposely go out looking for nests because I don't want to be there for too long. Because if you're disturbing a bird and it's off the nest, there's a concern that a crow or a gull would take that opportunity to come in, unfortunately, while the bird's worrying about you.
Yeah.
So, the other side to it is it's about having a conversation. So, for example, one of their meadows, um, they always have cut it late, but he would go around checking it on his quad bike. So now it's about thinking about the quad bike movements, reducing them or keeping to a set route perhaps rather than just, a random route across a field where the breeding waders are.
And the other the what came up in that other conversation in the podcast was about the gull population. Do you know, see noticeable increase in how many gulls are about? Is that something that you've noted in those 5 years? Has it had an impact, do you think?
It has an impact on disturbing the birds, and it is known that they will take a chick. There is still research going on. The gulls, though, the majority of these gulls are lesser blackback gulls, and they're heavily protected because the actual Boland breeding site is significant in terms of the overall breeding population for Europe. So it's not an easy conversation. And it's an ongoing dialogue, between Natural England, RSPB, and the landowners, etc about the goals. So sometimes though the goals are there because they hear the quad bike, and if they associate that quad bike with sheep being fed, as soon as the quad bike arrives, what the first goal might arrive, and then some of the others might, and they're actually after the food, what the sheep are being fed. So some farmers
Yeah.
have adapted by either feeding at night, or a neighbouring farmer's worked out to mixes into molasses into his grass feed, so that therefore there isn't the same food for the gulls, and he thinks he's had a reduced problem with gulls being attracted by him feeding the sheep. So it's whether farmers are able to adapt to that kind of behaviour from the gulls and think about ways around it.
Oh, so it's like the Pavlovian response to the sound of the quad bike. We've
Yes,
trained them.
I suspect it is. Yeah,
And that's suppose, and it links into the partly into we've talked with Henry about the MSO that was funded through FIPL, and so through a project that you were involved in, and that idea of actually some of that is about trying to reduce that feed that goes into that farm, and I'm not saying it's an easy wish to have, is it? But actually, could it also impact on that goal situation? Is that is there something that could benefit the gulls by just having to feed less? And I know, what am I actually trying to say? I just hadn't really thought about it in that way before. And what proportion of feed are we losing, or are they losing to gulls?
yeah.
So they're baying X tons, and actually half of it, or whatever it might be, is going to feed the bird population.
And so Philip Miller from the RSPB trialled a few creep feeders with some farmers a few years ago, where the gulls can't get into the feed, but the lambs or the sheep can, because you can alter the way the
Yeah.
feeder distributes the food and that. And one or two farmers have taken that on board, but a lot of them found it perhaps, I don't know if it was more time consuming, didn't choose to continue with that or invest. Also, you've got to invest in a slightly more expensive feeder as well.
Yes, and I suppose it's the speed of spinning it out, isn't it, onto pasture versus having to fill them up and things like that. But yeah, it's interesting it's sort of thinking of the problem in different ways, isn't it? The
Another
the
thing
co
about,
the
yeah, sorry, go on.
No, the conversation was very much that the gulls they were there because they were living on the tip. But actually, we're also changing their behaviour. So how can we try and avoid influencing that behaviour? And we recognise it's a difficult, like, all of this is difficult. Who do you just like, who
Yeah,
decides which thing lives or which thing
yeah,
is controlled?
yeah. So the other conversations over the years that always help is about so some farmers are quite sheep dominated, whereas they've a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago, they got quite into Herefordshire at Lamb Hill, and cattle grazing on swards, grass swards, is different to sheep. And that definitely benefits because you end up with a more mixed, varied sward, grass sward in terms of height and variety of species, but also the cowpats and what cowpats breed in terms of dung beetles and all the invertebrates, because all these waders rely on invertebrate feeding and all need to be able to self feed as soon as they hatch, with the exception. I only discovered this recently. Apparently, oyster catchers can feed the chicks, which I didn't realize. So once the chick hatches, as well as the adult, the chicks are out there looking for food, so they need wet, muddy patches with invertebrates in. So whether it's shallow ditches or wet muddy patches or cow pats or where the cows are literally just been walking, through the mud helps. And then they have these you can improve the habitat by opening up ditches into with shallow edging or creating very shallow scrapes. So a scrape is not a pond, it's like an area of water that's got odd edges, wiggly edges, but it dries and gets wet, throughout the seasonality of the weather patterns and therefore has a better invertebrate population.
And it's interesting because I suppose and then bringing in that next delight, which is United Utilities, although it's weakening slowly, isn't it? Which is that they don't really like cattle grazing in some of their areas for other reasons. And so it's this delightful mixture of all of these different priorities and who
Yeah.
and how do we design this so-called perfect system? But I think it's interesting and the sheer volume of invertebrates that population need a
Yes.
day.
We've got
Yeah.
a lot of challenges. So, like earlier on, we talked about how farming practices have changed over time and will continue to evolve. But also, and some of that practices and behaviour the farmer has some control over, and other bits they don't because of the nature way farming's changed or the environment's changed in response to that. But weather and climate definitely has an impact, and predators do, and the breeding population sizes do. So all these are so linked that once populations get fragile, such as curlew and lapwing populations are so fragile now, it only needs a bad spell of weather. Like we had a bad early spring this year, which I'm pretty sure the lapwings struggled with and lost chicks and eggs. Whereas now we're having a better weather period. But and then in some areas, the impact of the predators, whether they're ground predators like stoats or weasels, foxes, etc., or whether it's a buzzard or a crow, etc., are having more impact because the populations are so fragile, if that makes sense. Whereas in the past, that whole ecosystem was more stable, I suppose.
Um, yeah, and it's that, and I suppose through that work you've been doing in the last 20 years, have you seen this? Is it population cycles? Is it just a slow decline? Is it that noticeable? Is it, as you say, boom and bust years is what we're seeing more of, or
I've
what's your
definitely
feel?
declined, and I'm not best placed to comment on that because I don't have the facts and figures to hand. But organisations like Curlew Action or Curlew Recovery Partnership, BTO, RSPB, definitely do have, and that we can get that information from them about population. But farmers themselves actually notice that change because they're there day in, day out, year after year. So, for example, that these people at Lamb Hill have been quite worried about their lapwing numbers. But this year, actually, we've probably had the best year we've had for a while. But whether that will continue for the next 2 or 3 years is hard to say. Whereas now there's only one or two pairs of curlew here. That's on the lower land. There is more once you get onto the moorland.
As your poster declares them to be, do you mean they're important, aren't they? They've been identified as those important species or an identifier for that area.
Yeah. Curlew and lapwing are on the red list, unfortunately, the UK red list for, birds at risk. And the interesting thing is, like curlew, for example, as I was just looking earlier on the BTO figure, it's 58,500 breeding pairs of curlew we have. That's actually a quarter of the global population. So it shows how significant UK populations are for a bird like that.
And, 'cause that's always interesting because when the UK always gets listed as, like, the worst biodiversity decline place ever, or we're really poor on biodiversity, but we seem to be quite important for certain species. So you mentioned was it the lesser black gull, sorry,
Yeah,
earlier?
for black gulls, yeah, again, we're a significant population of those for Europe.
From a Lamb Hill perspective, so Rob and Liz are very aware of that population, aren't they? They're doing various things to try and help it. Um, and I suppose environment schemes and all of that is contributes to allowing them to do that, doesn't it? So that pays for some of those management changes that are needed as well. And I'm just curious is there obvious things that people can try, or is it just we have to just keep going, more of the same?
Certainly the management of the fields, and the land management practices, whether it's vehicle movements or it's whether your livestock type and the time of year that they're on there. So, for example, when the birds arrive, by the time they get to mid-April, the lapwing are the earliest ones to nest, whereas, curlew are later, for example. It's about the winter, early spring grazing. It's good to have it there because you don't want big rank swards everywhere. You actually want open swards with scattered rush, for example, is good with damp features. So grazing is really important for sward management as well as for the fact that dung, for example, and for the invertebrates that we spoke about, etc. And then able to manage their livestock across the whole farm so that they reduce their numbers to reduce the likelihood of trampling during the breeding season. And then again, it's thinking about movements or maybe if you're cutting hay. So, for example, they've got a really nice meadow, which is quite light sward. Because it's quite a light sward, the chicks can walk through it. So that meadow is used by curlew and lapwing and oystercatcher for nesting in, even though the grass is growing, which they've traditionally done in the past. So they're managing that meadow as a species-rich meadow, but it's also benefiting the waders as well.
And that because it's lighter, then they'll wait longer for it to be cut into the season as well, I suppose, and also prioritising those chicks.
Yeah, so the sheep are off because it's going to grow as a meadow, so there's no sheep in there. The sward's growing, but it's not a tight sward like a silage field would be, which is quite challenging to walk through or to get lost in. Whereas a light sward, the birds can move around a lot better in it, but they can also see what's happening with the predators better as well.
And it's that sort of the local knowledge, isn't it? It's just between yourself between you've had a lot of experience with that farm and the farmer that's there all the time, just understanding or helping those
Yeah,
populations. And a lot of it is are simple, aren't they? But it's just got to be factored in to that planning, hasn't it? In the sort of the winter before to know where things are going to go and how to manage the
yeah.
changing the stock around.
And farmers know their land best, don't they? They know where the birds are and where they've been in the past. Lapwing will move around a little bit, depending if on the habitat conditions, I suspect. Sometimes though they will move around because of predators, but curlew are so loyal to their patches. They try and keep nesting in the same silage fields, whereas I've noticed this year on this particular farm, there's actually lapwing been breeding on 3 fields that haven't been They haven't used those for the last 2 or 3 years, whereas they're using them now. And other farmers have mentioned that how they notice that the lapwing are moving around a bit more. And if somebody ploughs up a bit of land, there's been some ploughed round, they'll go back in because they love an open ploughed sward to start with, don't they? When it's first been planted, it's an open sward and it's obviously got the food supply as well.
This is embarrassing to admit. I didn't realise that there was lapwings could get as far as Lincolnshire, and then you read it, and then they are a priority species for us, so they should be here, and I just don't see them.
Yeah.
We have a lot of trees, like for Lincolnshire, I think Lincolnshire is something like 1 or 2% forested, if that's even the phrase, and we're sort of at 5, 6%. So we've got quite a lot
Wow.
of lot of hedges, a lot of trees. So we're not in that, like, the broad acre type idea, I suppose, which is probably what they'd like.
Yeah, there is something called a predator shadow that they perceive that the waders are worried about. So they get used to where the trees and the hedges are and adapt to that. And as we do more tree planting and hedgerow connectivity, for biodiversity, for all sorts of reasons, it might have a negative impact in the existing breeding waders. And that's always a factor that we consider and our and other partners consider, and those are the conversations we have on farms, and that it's how you balance, the different aspirations in terms of going forward with habitat creation and management.
And I suppose the final tricky question is, Pandora's box, which is about predator control. So I went to a different farm that was up in County Durham where they did have hardcore predator control, and there was oyster catchers flying around like I would like associate flocks of pigeons. Like the sheer abundance was incredible. And so where's our thinking in terms of predator control?
That will vary across the country depending on, how the land ownership, the estate, um, individual estates or individual farmers who might have another interest in terms of running shoots, for example. And often with shoots, you have associated gamekeepers and predator control. Whereas once you're outside those areas, in terms of predator control, that will be entirely down to individuals. So you can legally manage, for example, crows and magpies, etc., and stoats, but it's labour intensive, and it's about having the time and knowledge to do that. It's a really difficult conversation because some people are very strongly opposed to it, but I think it's getting easier to have that conversation, across the whole sector of the wider population. So 2 years ago, I attended a workshop which was held down in Norfolk. It's organised by Curlew Action, and it was the first workshop they ran for field workers and scientists together who work on curlew conservation in the UK and in Europe. And it was quite a sensitive, difficult topic that some people weren't willing to have at that conference, and there wasn't any specific workshops focused on it. 2 years later, this second workshop was ran at Lancaster University this February, and it changed. There were actually focused workshops focused on it, and people sharing their what's going on and what works and what doesn't work, and people were having those difficult conversations.
So as you say, so it's site specific, isn't it? Wider objectives, how fragile is that population? What skills are available to control it? All of those things. There is no one delightful, simple option. It depends. Okay.
And it's a sensitive topic for some people, isn't it? But it's a reality as well.
Yeah, and I think part of sort of the conversation with Liz and Rob is not saying that, like, none of us have the answer, do we? It's just having the conversations with all the trying to bring a range of views into the conversation. Um, it was quite clear from the Liz was very much about wanting to get on and farm, and Rob was more about this sort of understanding the diversity. So it is also in a farming partnership, you also get different viewpoints, don't you, in terms of like what are the priorities. So it's just having those open conversations, but they are delightfully awkward.
Don't know if you know, but Orkney, the Orkney Islands, they have the Orkney Wildlife Trust coordinate the stoat eradication program, and they started that a few years ago. Well, obviously, you can imagine, some people would not be able to accept that at all, but it's actually, been agreed by that collaboration coordinated for the Wildlife Trust that if they're going to retain their populations of ground nesting birds, they were going to tackle their breeding stoats population issues. And some of their individual islands now perhaps are stoat free. I'm not sure if they're entirely 100% stoat free, but they're really, I think it's over 8,500 stoats they've already taken out of the system, legally as part of that, that campaign.
Yeah, and it's back to the earlier conversation, which is we control populations, don't we? And I suppose what
Mhm.
we're trying to avoid is downstream consequences that we didn't think about.
Yes.
That's
And
the
as you said earlier on, it's so different across the UK, isn't it? Because our landscape's different, but our farming practices are different. Our weather systems are different. All sorts of things are so complicated, aren't they?
Yeah, and it was interesting. Yeah, we were cutting some hay yesterday, and my sister was trying desperately to save some pheasants. And then above us was 12 red kites circling, and it's like fair play. We can do so much, can't we? But then when you've got a population of that many kites, so the anyway, we shall see. We won't, and we and because where our ground nesting birds are basically pheasants and skylarks. That's about as exciting exotic as we get. But we have a lot of kites and
Yeah.
buzzards. I just think they just look like that's what pterodactyls would be like, swarms of pterodactyls above your head.
But going back to, we're very fortunate that we got a combination of landowners are also their own farm. They farm their own land, but even with them, the larger estates with the tenants, they are passionate, or they understand how valuable actually the farmed land within Boland is for breeding waders. In context of the UK, and and because some of them, say, that I didn't realize, that because you see them every day until they go out to the area or they go somewhere else and notice the difference. Or like with brown hares, for example, as well, or something. So,
Yeah, and if it's all about getting those different perspectives in, isn't it? We all
yeah,
become experts in our own field, and then every now and again we have to just go outside the parish, perhaps.
yeah, and we've got some really good examples of farmers who understand it so much better than somebody coming from the outside like me and doing a survey, because they're there, they've had their dad or their grandfather's kind of wisdom and knowledge as well to reflect back on as well, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinating. In the social, agree. The social history. I had some chats with people of how they previously controlled ticks, and it's that sort of building this understanding of what's gone before, what worked, what didn't work, and then overlaying that with loads of changes. So even the stuff that did work years ago is no longer applicable. The delight of history, isn't it? It's trying to get this wide view of what's going on.
Yeah. So at Lamb Hill, for example, Liz's mum, Christine, has always been very knowledgeable and interested in, the ground flora, the moorland habitats, but her waders as well, So that information and that knowledge is still there, on the doorstep.
Perfect. Thank you, Taria. We will hopefully see you on the 9th of July at
Yes, I've got it
Lamb
in my
Hill.
diary.
And so on the event, we're sort of looking over. We probably won't wade through where the breeding waders are, but we'll look at the
No
habitat
pun
that they're
intended
in.
there.
No, not at all. So yeah, on the farm walk, we'll go and look at some of the habitats and and then talk about what they do to manage it. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.